Welcome to Super Movie Brothers. Let's start the show.
This is a podcast on the Podfix Network. You can check out more shows like it at podfixnetwork.com.
To Super Movie Brothers, episode 133. I'm your host, Super Movie Brother Dave.
I'm your host, Super Movie Brother Jay.
Hey, Jay.
It's been 1 week since you looked at me. Got your head to the sides and I'm angry.
How's your week been going so far, man? I know you haven't been up to a whole lot.
I have not. I've actually been working a lot more, catching up on some movies, some movie homeworks, and some True Detective. So, I honestly really have not had much of a social life.
I myself, I jerk off at least twice a day. I want to. That's not why I do it. I do it because I need to.
Yeah, same for me. I haven't really been up to a whole lot. It's not a whole lot for me to get into.
And it's just cold out. Do you really want to do anything but just hole up and just sip on a beer and watch some good TV and movies? That's all you want to do.
It is fucking blustery out. Like, it was 8 degrees last night.
You mean winters and igloos and Eskimos and penguins and ice? Possibly. See you.
And we were supposed to get dumped on by a big winter storm. It ended up moving north. We just got a whole bunch of rain. It was 52 degrees. And then right after that, the cold snap happened. And yeah, I have
wonky weather, man.
And I work outside a fair bit for my job. So I'm bundled up pretty well. And I feel like the little kid from A Christmas Story, where I'm just walking around, I'm waddling around and stuff like that. But I have to get on my hands and knees a lot to look under things. So I look like an old man because I could barely bend over from all the fluff, all the stuffing that's inside
you just
me.
belly flop on the ground,
Just all the padding. But we did record our 3 Flavors of Cornetto trilogy. We recorded our movie Cocktail for that.
Yeah, boy!
Yes,
and
ton of fun.
We did 3 cocktails, me, you, and Lauren. So we recorded that. That'll be the episode that comes out next week. But an interesting thing was going on while we were recording that, Jay. I know we always wind up talking about football during football season somehow. You were intently keeping close tabs on the Kansas City Patriots game because in the fourth quarter, the lead had changed 4 times. So
crazy quarter.
So we go out there and we watch Kansas City basically tie it up. They were down. It was 31-28. They kick a field goal. It's tied 31-31. It's going into overtime. And I told you that was going to be the thing that decided that game because they should have done that one more play and tried to get it into the end zone before kicking that field goal, because you do not want to go into overtime against the Patriots because all luck is on their side. And just to prove it to you, I made a bet with you.
You did.
That at the coin toss, Patriots will win the coin toss. You had a 50-50 chance.
And that's all it was.
That's all it was. You know, 50-50 chance. The bet was I was going to have to watch a movie of your choosing, which was going to be some boring indie movie called Tape. And then I was going to make you watch a Cornetto trilogy adjacent film, Paul, who you thought looked extremely stupid and you had no interest in it whatsoever.
Right. Yeah.
And I think it's a nice love letter to sci-fi fans and complements the Cornetto trilogy pretty well. It's not as good as those, but I felt like you should watch it, especially because you vehemently talked about hating it so much. So
yeah, I saw the trailer and I was like, hell to the no.
So the coin flip comes. Patriots have heads. Kansas City has tails. It's heads. Patriots go in and they score a touchdown.
Of course.
Right in their first
it's fucking Tom Brady.
In their first drive, and the game's over and they win. I hate to bet for the Patriots, but I love betting against you, and I can't wait for your movie homework next week. Oh, well, in 2 weeks. After
2 weeks.
After Cornetto, because you're going to have to watch Paul, and you still have to do Willow. So we've been talking about our movie homeworks a lot here. So why don't we get over and let's do our movie homeworks. You have The Fly.
I have The Fly,
which was assigned by our patron Kim, my sister, about 3-4 months ago, and you're just now getting around to seeing it.
Perhaps.
Yeah, and you promised
Was it Friendsgiving all the way back in November?
and you promised people that you were going to do both that and Willow, but you didn't.
Well, shit happens.
Yeah, shit happens. I did say last episode that you were going to be fired if you skipped a movie homework again.
Yeah. Well,
So now I'm going to have to put up a poll on Patreon to see whether our board of directors decides to save your job or not.
oh boy.
And I had to watch Spawn, which was given to me. Technically, it was for you, but I'm taking that bullet for you because you already have so many movie homeworks stacked up from our patrons that I decided to take Spawn because I had never seen Spawn through and through. So let's get into our movie homeworks. All right, Jay, my movie homework is going to be pretty brief. So I'll go first. So I had to watch Spawn. So Spawn was released in 1997. It was directed by Mark A. Z. Dippe. I don't know why he has two middle initials, but Mark A. Z. Dippe is the director, and it was written by Todd McFarlane and Alan B. McElroy. It stars, and this is crazy, the cast: Michael Jai White, John Leguizamo, and Martin Sheen.
I loved you in Wall Street!
Like, Martin Sheen has no business being in this movie whatsoever. I'm wondering whether he fell back into cocaine when he started making this movie.
He probably did while making this movie. He was like, you know what? Just put it on the budget now.
Put it on the
I'm
budget.
gonna start
It's
getting
the
back into some blood.
only way I'm getting through this. So I remember like enjoying Spawn somewhat back then. I was actually like a fan of the comics, right? Like I have the first 12 issues of the comic, the first year of its run. It's honestly a pretty historic comic book in the fact that it was really the first creator-owned comic to sell that many issues, and it was kind of breaking new ground, and it was edgy, it was cool, it was dark, it was the 90s, man. Everything was extreme. And this movie is so fucking 90s. Like, the plot is just paper fucking thin.
Yeah.
The characterizations are all paper thin. The villain is absolutely terrible. He's just mustache twirling, and he's also off-putting because he's Martin Sheen with jet black hair and a jet black beard.
Just for men, stay in the game.
John Leguizamo is the saving grace of the movie. Him as the Violator is so over the top and so fun. It's truly like the one thing that like I watch in this movie, and I have fun with that. That's the one thing I have fun with.
Every time somebody farts, a demon catches her wings. Twins.
The CGI is truly awful. When the credits start for this movie, Jay, you are treated to about what feels like 10 minutes of a swirling CGI tornado of fire as names are thrown at you that were involved in this movie. It takes so long for
In
the
a bad way?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
For the movie to get started. No, what I mean is it's literally a 1997 CGI flames, and not even good CGI for 1997. Then you get all the scenes where Spawn is in hell, right? And like he's fighting Malboja, and Malboja's this like this awful.
I think Jamie Foxx is actually supposed to be Spawn, right? In a remake?
In the remake. So
yeah.
I'll get to that like towards the end, talking about the remake. But then we also have Cagliostro, who is the man who's kind of like training Spawn how to use his powers. And at the end, Spawn and him go to hell to fight Malboja, and the CGI that they use on Castiello, like it just looks so terrible. There's one point where Malboja like picks him up, and he's kind of dressed like a knight in armor, and he turns from like a guy standing there as a knight in armor with this awful CGI backdrop, and when Malboja the creature picks him up, he turns into like this Morbus blob, like just in Malboja's hand with barely any shape or form to it whatsoever. I remember the cape, right? Like Spawn, like so much of Spawn comes from like that flowing cape that almost seems like it has a mind of its own, and it defies all laws of gravity and physics. And when they show it in this movie, it looks worse than Lamagra the Blood God from Blade. Like, if you remember when Lamagra the Blood God in Blade shows up, it is absolutely awful CGI. It looks almost exactly like that, but worse.
Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill.
There is just so many bad things about this movie. But honestly, if you're a fan of Spawn, this is the best you got. This is the best you could get. And it was made on really a shoestring budget for what could have been, if more money was thrown at it, probably a pretty decent film. You gotta remember, it was 1997. So there
it has its following.
Right. Oh yeah. There was no Raimi Spider-Man at this point, right? There hadn't been X-Men yet, and there hadn't even been Blade yet. So the resurgence of comic book movies hadn't started yet. This was really right at the tail end of the first generation of comic book films that was ending, because this came out the same year as Batman and Robin. So I think it might catch more flack than it deserves, but it's not good. There's nothing spectacular about it. But yes, they are. Todd McFarlane was not extremely happy with how this movie turned out, and they are making a new one with Jamie Foxx who's going to be playing Al Simmons. He's going to be playing the Spawn character. But honestly, like, Todd McFarlane's just gone a little bit crazy to me. Like, he's always been a very crazy, a very hyperbolic guy, and a very self-centered guy, very egotistical type guy. But, he has highfalutin thoughts about what this new Spawn film is going to be. He's even been talking about how, like, he created Venom and he would love for Spawn and Venom to get together. And he keeps talking about how he thinks that could happen. He's in talks with Sony. No, you're not. No, you're fucking not. That movie, Venom, for as bad as that movie was, just made almost $1 billion. It made over $800 million. They are not going to sully that with you, sir, with you at all. But he keeps talking about how it's a possibility. And it gets people excited. One thing Spawn the movie did, and Image Comics and Spawn, comic book series, is it spawned an extremely successful toy business out of McFarlane Toys, and they are some of the best collectibles for shit you like that you can get. So if anything, you got that out of it. So yeah. Sorry, Duty. I hope you didn't assign this to me because you loved it, because I don't ever need to go back to this again. Thank you for that trip down memory lane and letting me watch it for the first time through and through from beginning to end. I am not any better for having done it, but I do my movie homework, unlike other people.
I did one of them.
You did one. All right, Jay, what was your movie homework, which I'm somewhat jealous of, but I did watch because I love the movie that you watched, and I wanted to be able to talk about it with you.
Sure. It's the cult classic, The Fly, written and directed by David Cronenberg, one of his earlier works from 1986. It is an hour and 36 minutes. It's a taut little movie, centralized in pretty much one location. The scientist's apartment, essentially, I guess, his loft, played by Jeff Goldblum. And it also stars Gina Davis,
who is the reporter who's writing. She's meant to write an article on the transportation device that he's invented, and he convinces her to turn it into a full-blown book about what he's doing. She moves in with him. Love ensues. He can't.
It's a sexy movie in the beginning. It's kind of a nice little.
And it's
charismatic.
It's kind of cool that, like, so he can't crack the code for how to send organisms through. Any organic matter gets screwed up. He sends the baboon through, and when it comes through, it's all turned inside out and disgusting and gross, which Cronenberg does so fucking well.
He really does.
So he then has sex with Gina Davis, and suddenly the mystery is solved. He busted his nut, and he immediately knows.
That's all you needed.
He knows how.
That's where every guy gets his great ideas from.
Yeah, there or taking a shit. Either way, something's exiting your body, and it feels good. And he runs off and he reprograms it, and he's able to send organic material through it, and he sends himself through it. And unfortunately, a housefly got in there while he did it. And instead of like the original Fly, where it's the head and arm of the fly get attached to the scientist, and there's a fly out there with a human head somewhere stuck in the spider's web.
Oh god, no.
Cronenberg kind of like retooled it so that in this case, the fly assimilated with his DNA.
Which is a lot more interesting, obviously.
100%. And gives you those great practical effects.
Wow. That's by far one of the most fascinating things about this movie is the slow progression of the turnover of him not even being completely aware of it at first. You know, you see it through his behavior more and through his strength and through his energy and his erratic behavior.
He initially thinks that
until you start seeing the physical changes.
Right. He initially thinks like, oh my God, like I become this superhuman because the transportation device has cleared me of all toxics, of all toxins. Like it has brought out my full potential.
Right.
And that's what he thinks.
Almost dragged Gina Davis inside,
and that's what he thinks
herself.
Is going on. But it turns out that like he's just getting the powers of a fly, and like it sounds like the beginning of like Flyman, the superhero. But where it goes is so incredibly twisted and really fucked up.
It's really fucked up, and it's really interesting to watch. I mean, the effects, even just watching him crawl up and down the ceiling and the walls, and how well done that is, and all in one take, and you know. Just it's an interesting movie.
Yeah. Well, when they created the effects for it, they saw it as they actually started with the fly creature that you see at the end, and they worked backwards from there. You know, so that way
that makes sense.
So that way
that's actually really smart.
So that way they can create the effects that would eventually melt off of Seth's body. So they worked it in reverse, which is really cool. And they saw it as being in 7 stages of like turning into this fly creature.
Right.
And it won an Academy Award for special effects.
It better have.
Yeah. And does it surprise you that this is the most successful David Cronenberg movie?
And he's still a prominent filmmaker.
That's right.
Kind of crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he did 2 of your favorite movies, A History of Violence and Eastern Promises.
I know. And I do love those movies. And I think he is an interesting artist. You know, I will probably see most of his, I'll see all of his movies actually, that are coming out still to this day, even though they're not always that great. They're still original and unique experiences. So,
I think that's why this movie kind of stands the test of time, because there's nothing else out there like it.
You'll never see effects like this too.
You can't compare it to something and say like, oh, The Fly is like this. No, The Fly is not like that. The Fly is like The Fly. Nothing else is really like The Fly.
Yeah. Yeah.
and it truly is amazing and a testament to practical effects. And I still wish that we did practical effects like this, you know, because it reminds me a lot of like The Thing, right? I wish we still did practical effects like that.
I know. And just comparing the two, my God, this is on screen for so much more time than any other practical effect movie at that time. Alien, Thing, whatever. It doesn't matter. I mean, this has by far the most screen time in a Hollywood blockbuster.
He took what those things did and applied it to the
a feature-length film, essentially.
Yeah, pretty much. And it has a lot of like allegory in it as well. You know, a lot of the allegory is tied to illness, and a lot of people at the time when this came out in the 80s basically saw this as like an allegory for AIDS. It's not what Cronenberg actually intended.
Oh.
He intended it to be like cancer, like sickness.
That was a fucked up time frame, though.
But you know, in his mind, he goes, you know what? Yeah, if you or a family member or someone you know is going through this, and you want to draw that allegory, that's great. You know, I'm not telling you not to. It's just for, you know, it's an allegory for sickness and illness in and of itself. And it's truly a fucked up movie, but it's a fantastic movie. And if you haven't seen The Fly, you really got to check it out. And I'm surprised that Jay likes it as much as he does, because, you know, this type of horror sci-fi genre is not your thing at all. I generally have to get you kicking and screaming to watch movies like this.
I don't know.
This is a cult classic.
But this is more my beat, though, I think, more than any of the other kind of stuff. I mean, I don't know what you're referencing to, but I mean, it's just in general, those older movies, it's hard for me to get back. It's hard for me to get into, not just getting into them, but like put them on.
Right.
That's really what it's all about, is actually me putting it on, getting to that point. But I really am happy. This was a good homework assignment for me. Fuck Willow. I'm not looking forward to that. I'm sure to hate it, but
directed by Ron Howard.
Whatever.
George Lucas.
Yeah, well,
produced.
like Ron Howard has anything to. There's no pull for that. Not anymore. Ron is extremely hot and cold.
Jay, it's got little people. It's got even littler people, and it's got
everybody's little to me, David.
And it's got sorcerers. I can't wait for you to watch Paul.
I'd rather see Paul. I'm not that. I'm cool with Paul. I can handle that, I think. We'll see.
All right, so those are our movie homeworks for this week. I want to thank Alex Duty Dutram on our Patreon for assigning me Spawn, and I want to thank my sister Kim over from our Patreon who assigned Jay The Fly. And now, Jay, we got to get into our listener questions.
You could ask yourself a question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?
It just raises too many questions.
Excuse me. I'd like to ask you a few questions.
The answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything.
All right, so this week, instead of taking listener questions from people, what I decided to do was I was going to ask people questions and kind of like go through some of the responses here. So the first one I did was I posted a picture that I did in Photoshop app, and it was Indiana Jones, Captain America, and the Rocketeer together. And I just wanted to know, would anybody be interested in seeing a movie like that? And I expected the response to be like, 3 or 4 people just saying their piece and being done. We got like 53 responses, so I obviously can't go through all of them here, but I'm going to go through some of the best ones. So Zero Supervision Comics at Zero Comic Books on Twitter said, I mean, if you don't, then the Nazis win.
Nazis. I hate these guys.
Which I thought was funny. Aaron Cole, one of our patrons, he's the host of the Raw Opinions podcast. He said, you bet your sweet ass. Justin from So I Married a Movie Geek, he said he would see it if it was Green Room, but with these 3. Ooh. So neo-Nazis and Patrick Stewart.
Ooh.
I think that would be a fantastic movie. Death by Film podcast said, without a doubt, the easiest yes to any question ever. Alex Duty Dutram, our patron, the host of the Shaken Not Nerd podcast, said, nope, just nope.
Okay.
He wouldn't want to see it. And Stork, one of the hosts of the Besotted Geek podcast, you can follow them on Twitter at Besotted Geek Pod, said, at first I thought yes, because the picture is so cool. Great work. So he's complimenting me on my skills. Thanks.
You do have skills.
But thinking on it, I don't really care about the Rocketeer, and I wouldn't want Indy bogged down with that goofiness that came along with Cap's history. So comics, sure, but a movie, no. And then I sent him a gif of Moharam pulling the heart out of a guy's chest. And I said, you're right. Indiana Jones is so grounded in reality. I didn't mean to goof it all up. And he's like, don't add logic to my thought process. All right. Brian Stever on Twitter said, and then in the post-credits scene, we see a tied-up Short Round. He looks up to see his captors are the duo of Red Skull and Molaram, returned from the grave. I'm thinking of this scene in my head, and I'm picturing Short Round. He's a little older than he was in Temple of Doom. He's tied to his chair, and he's just kind of like shaking the chair, and he's like, won't break. Strong wood.
Yeah, strong wood.
And we need a pirate ship at _ghost_blurred said, this is the team up comic I never knew I'd needed. I'd be happy with just a Rocketeer and Cap, but throwing Indiana Jones into the mix too. Whispers, can we find a way to mix the Phantom in as well? Since Disney's buying up everything else, they might as well just buy up the Phantom just to complete this set. And Hiccups and Happiness at Hiccups Hapine1 on Twitter said, I don't see why any red-blooded American wouldn't want to see this. Jay, you put the same question up on Facebook. Any responses over there?
Yeah, there's a couple. We have Kenny from our old Movie Cocktail podcast.
That's right.
He mentioned Lobster Johnson. Now, if you guys don't know Lobster Johnson, he is a real person.
Right. He's
a fictional character featured from the Hellboy series.
Right. He's from the BPRD characters. Yes. So yeah, that's okay. So he would like to add Lobster Johnson into the mix.
And Justin Eck from Epic Film Guys loves the idea and really wants to see the Rocketeer.
Yeah, I just kind of want to see the Rocketeer return in general. The original movie in the early 90s directed by Joe Johnston is not fantastic, but it's a lot of fun. And I think the premise and the idea is one that's worth exploring more. The comic books actually have a bit of a cult following. IDW has been producing comics for the Rocketeer for a couple years now. And I think that since Disney still owns, still owns the rights and everything, I would like to see the Rocketeer return.
They own the world, so yeah, they should.
I would like to see it return. I think it's something that deserves another go around. I know we hate remakes. We talk about, everything's a remake of a remake of a remake, but there is some properties that do deserve another go around, another chance to breathe, another chance to live.
I agree, but we both know that very, very, very much that initial shock reaction a lot of times is very ho-hum. It is very like, oh, fuck, really? Those kind of reactions. I know I get it all the time. And then after it marinates for a little bit, you get more and more excited. And then lo and behold, you have a great movie. So, sometimes it works out for the best.
Absolutely. And I asked another question this week. So I was watching Zodiac, and you know how much I love that movie, Jay. I'm actually going
to rewatch it soon, yeah.
I absolutely love Zodiac, and I feel really proud because I got someone to watch the movie this week as well. And I just had to know, what was everyone's favorite serial killer movie? And we got a ton of responses to this. So the Dare Daniel podcast says he's got to go with the classics, In Cold Blood, Thin Blue Line. Chris from the More Gooder Than podcast said it was Frailty. Izzy Fishkondrick said Rope. And I actually never heard of Rope, and this really surprises me because it turns out Rope is a Alfred Hitchcock film that I had never seen. And I've seen a lot of Hitchcock films, so...
Are you going to see it?
It's going to be a movie homework for me now.
Sure.
Kyle said Silence of the Lambs, Copycat, 7, To Catch a Killer, Zodiac, and The Boston Strangler. Now, I've never seen The Boston Strangler. I've seen the rest of them. So I'm kind of interested in Boston Strangler. That's another true life one, just like Zodiac was. Brooke Reading Podcast. She actually watched Zodiac for the first time after I posted this question and said it was absolutely amazing. And it is my favorite serial killer movie, and I think it's one of the most underrated David Fincher movies that's come out.
It really is.
There's a lot of love for Silence of the Lambs, for 7 that go on here. Stork from @Besotted Geek podcast, he said Psycho, first person to say Psycho on there, and I guess he technically counts as a serial killer. A few people were getting into the horror movie genre, like, does Michael Myers really count as a serial killer? And I think technically he is. However, he doesn't carry that tone that like a serial killer movie does. There's no like investigation involved and stuff like that. Really, that's what I was getting at, like the investigation aspect of it.
Okay. Well, actually, Justin from Epic Film Guys actually had a couple interesting throw-ins. Henry, The Portrait of a Serial Killer.
There were a few of those on Twitter, yeah.
And then last year's The House That Jack Built was a very intriguing look, he said, inside of the mind of a serial killer.
I haven't seen The House That Jack Built, so.
Yeah, I'm going to put it on my list. I'll get to that eventually. Yeah. And we had some other similar mentions of movies that we mentioned already before, Silence of the Lambs, Psycho, American Psycho, and of course Zodiac. So, and 7, of course, but a lot of good comments out there. Really appreciate all the feedback. It was really fun over the weekend, to throw that out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys for taking the time out to respond to us on Twitter. We'll be back with collecting some of your listener questions for next week's show. So if you want to respond to us on Twitter or ask us any questions through Facebook, you can follow us on Twitter @SuperMoviePod. You can also follow us on Facebook, Super Movie Bros Podcast on there. Ask a question anytime you want. If it's the one we want to use, it'll show up on the show. Me and Jay will discuss it. All right, Jay, finally, before we head over and start doing our beers, we got to find out, what were you watching this week, buddy?
What are you watching?
What are we watching?
He's trying to watch some illegal channel.
Always watching.
No, go past this part. In fact, never play this again.
All right, Jay, like you said, light week, so I'm sure that you weren't watching a whole lot, but what'd you get around to watching other than your movie homework, The Fly?
Well, The Fly, and obviously a movie cocktails movie for me, The World's End. So I rewatched that as well. And I got to see the movie Fury. Remember the movie Fury? I'm not sure if you've seen it or not. It's an underappreciated movie, I think, out there. It is a tank war movie, and it is directed by and written by David Ayer.
Did I see Fury? Who the fuck you talking to?
I'm just saying. I still feel like this is an underappreciated movie.
It really was. It got a lot of love for the acting in it, I think, when it came out.
Sure.
John Bernthal, Shia LaBeouf,
This is
Brad
before
Pitt.
John Bernthal kind of took off, but it was like right on the under the cusp of that to take off. But also, again, Logan Lerman surprising everybody. Yeah. I mean, he is a good actor. Yeah, he's a pretty boy face, but He really delivers it again. Michael Pena, of course, is great. Shia LaBeouf, I think, never showered during the shoot, so I'm sure he was great in the tank, with the boys. And Brad Pitt was solid as a rock,
Absolutely.
It was a very enjoyable movie, and it was...
it's worth the rewatch, for sure.
It's worth the rewatch every once in a while, and it's been a few years for me since I've seen it, so that was a cool movie to see. And then also, True Detective is still going pretty strong for me. Like we talked... after we watched the episode, the third episode, it gets a little bit more into that transitional tone. It does have some good reveals, but overall, I think I'm still enjoying the way it's going. It's certainly back on par with what we're expecting from this kind of series.
With season one. And for me, I spent most of the weekend watching The Punisher. I mean, I did my normal rewatches of classics and stuff while I edit, because when I edit, I need something on, but I need something on that I don't have to give my full attention to. So I usually put on stuff that I've watched 100 times. So I watched Ghostbusters, I watched Goonies, I watched classics.
Yeah.
But really, I sunk most of me and Lauren's time in this week to watching The Punisher. And honestly, I'm enjoying season 2 more than season 1. I think season 2 gets itself rolling a whole lot quicker. Season 1 took a lot of time to really set up Frank and his state of mind and stuff like that after Daredevil season 2, and I didn't think that was necessary because we knew who he was already, and I guess they wanted to establish a new baseline for him in that season. This one, he kind of hits the ground running. I think the first episode's extremely fantastic. My only knock on it is it does slow down right in the middle, and then you wind up wondering why is this a 13 episode series? Why is every season 13 episodes? You don't need it to be 13 episodes. 10 gets the job done. 8 probably can do it better.
Good point. Seven's the key number here. Think about it. Right. 7 11s. Yeah. 7 dwarfs. 7, man. That's the number. 7 chipmunks twirling on a branch, eating lots of sunflowers on my uncle's ranch. You know that old children's tale from the sea?
So that's been my knock on all of the Marvel Netflix shows. But let's face it, we're at the end. This is the second to last one. We got Jessica Jones season 3 coming, and then they're done.
I think it's probably because most of them are very not just character based, but also action based. So a lot of the action takes a lot of time.
It's true,
and they're not rushing through these stories. So they have. It's fucking Netflix. You can get away with doing 10 episode series for them. It's not a big deal for them.
I will say this, it's an extremely digestible season, more so than the first season. And if you've given up on the Marvel Netflix shows, definitely watch The Punisher, because it's probably the strongest one, and it stands pretty well next to Daredevil. I think other than Daredevil, it's the second best one.
I'll be if not well into season 2 when we record again. So I'm looking forward to getting back into it.
All right, Jay, we got a 5-minute-ish review to do. You and I went to the movie theaters. We saw Glass this weekend.
Indeed.
And we got to do a 5-minute-ish review before we get into our beers.
I'll tell you a secret. I want to believe in real-life superheroes. Like every kid in the world. But I'm still waiting.
And yet, we exist.
All right, Jay. Glass. Written and directed by M. Night Shyamalan, who's had a little bit of a rough road, going after his early on success. He made some films that were less than that were less than well received by critics and by audiences.
But his previous 2 movies have kind of righted his wrongs.
It's
of
true.
Sort.
So he made The Visit early on in, I think it was 2014, 2015, The Visit came out, and people really enjoyed that. Then Split came, and people, really wound up enjoying Split. And now we're here, and we're doing Glass, which Split obviously set up itself as a in-universe film with Unbreakable, and he immediately set to work on Glass, on tying up that universe. So the synopsis for Glass, my brief synopsis for it goes like this. Mr. Glass is about to get some company at Raven Hill Sanitarium as David Dunn and Kevin Crumb, along with his 24 other identities, including the Beast, are committed to be treated for their superhero psychosis. Now that they are all together, it's time for Mr. Glass to enact his master plan. And that's, I think the beginning of the movie spends a rightfully fair bit of time catching you up with David Dunn.
Yeah.
over the past 15 years and kind of like what because we haven't seen him really since Unbreakable. We get that brief moment of him in Split, and that's really it. So I was appreciative of taking the time to catch up with David.
It was so brief. It wasn't even the tip. It was so brief. It was terrible. Yeah.
It's 15 minutes is what you get with them, and that's kind of like the most. That's kind of the depth into his character that you get from that point on. Like, you know, we pick up where we left him off, and they do nothing new with him, really. He's basically the same guy. He's just lost a few more things along the way.
Well, he's working now with his son.
Right, but that's it. I mean, that's it.
And that's it. I mean, yeah, he's still doing what he was doing.
Right.
He's not even 100% a vigilante per se.
We're not even sure.
Yeah, we're not even sure. It wasn't even laid out.
We don't explore it enough. But Glass it's 100% a slow burn. It's a lot like Unbreakable, you know, before it. It takes its time. It reacquaints us to David Dunn, and it kind of, the first act, I would say, the first third of the movie is getting reacquainted to these two characters. We don't even see Glass until the second act of the movie at the asylum. But once they're there at the asylum, the film begins to tread extremely familiar ground, and it starts casting doubt on the things that we already know about these characters and their abilities. It starts like immediately like you know, making the audience as well as the characters question whether they truly have superpowers or not, which I found interesting because
but I think I saw.
You saw through it.
I saw through it.
And I saw through it.
Because they were beating it over its head a little too strong.
Not only that, we just spent, you know, 2 movies learning that these superpowers do exist and being meant to believe them.
So and that's why it just didn't make any sense. Like, why you keep doing this? Why you keep like over exaggerating this so much and spending so much time in the asylum?
But it is 100% a slow burn. It's not a thrill ride. So, you know, if you're strapping yourself into this expecting that 70-foot drop with a loop-de-loop and all that stuff, and it's not that. And I think that I saw a lot of comments from people saying that, like, oh, you know, there wasn't enough action and stuff like that. M. Night Shyamalan's not an action movie director. He tried to do an action movie once. He did The Last Airbender. It was absolutely awful. He's not an action director.
Look at his choices in this movie. Even the point of view camera stuff. There were moments and glimpses of great shots and great little things, but overall the fight sequences were certainly underwhelming.
Right. You mentioned there was like one good one with the Beast, and it's kind of in the background too. It's not even in the forefront,
which is cool. With Glass wheeling off, and then the Beast is throwing down.
It's in the it's actually a scene in the trailer. Which is like the best scene in the movie. It's in the trailer.
Kind of. Yeah.
So it's really hard to separate these I think for an audience, it's hard for people to separate these superpowered people in this movie from what they've come to be used to in the DCEU and the MCU, because when Unbreakable came out in 2000, it wasn't competing with the big action films that audiences are used to now. It was a film that had some big ideas, but it had a small package. It was a very small story, and it took its time giving its big reveal. And Glass retreads that ground all over again, which I think is the problem. Instead of adding new ideas to this mythos, it really does nothing other than really, you know, show how truly gifted Glass's mind is and how it works and how he brings a plan to fruition. We saw that in the first one. You're not giving me anything new. And it's really sad, because I thought that this would kind of, and maybe it's my fault for going in there with a preconceived notion that this would really like bring David Dunn as a hero to the forefront. It would really solidify Glass and the Beast as like these villains and stuff like that, kind of completing the archetypes that Glass had set forth. But
the development did not.
I should have been paying attention to the other movies before going in, because you don't get payoffs in M. Night Shyamalan movies like that.
Yeah.
You know, you get a big twist and a reveal at the end.
And there's not really that much of a twist either in this movie. It's not that kind of movie. It's not set up like that movie either.
It's not an earned twist is what it is, because there was nothing that was set up in the plot to give you that twist, right? There was nothing that, there was nothing going through those lines. But I think the twist was of how Glass came about his plan and how he got everybody.
Sure.
And I think also the setting being in the sanitarium pretty much, for 2/3 of the movie winds up hurting it because it feels like it's setting you up.
You feel the length of the movie way more.
It feels like it's setting you up to go somewhere else. They tease they're going to go somewhere else, and it winds up ending in and around the sanitarium. And
do you feel any more emotion, more or less? Not so much.
That was the thing,
and that was really one of the things when later on, when you leave the movie and you reflect back on it, you're like, wow. These are 3 movies and 3 strong characters that you had a reaction to for a while.
Right. Especially with Unbreakable. Yeah.
And after the big third final movie, you're just kind of like...
You're meant to feel emotion, but you feel nothing. And I think
you just don't.
I don't know why. I think it was there in the story, but I think the way the story was told with the camera work and stuff like that.
M. Night dropped the ball.
Right. You get robbed of that finale, because of the camera work. I hated the point of view of like one of the characters and how their story ends and stuff. I was like, this is not great.
But again, Dave, I did not enjoy myself watching the movie. That's one of the things.
No, I still enjoyed myself.
You can easily critique this movie pretty well.
I really liked the end. Like,
it's I think it's still an interesting piece of work. Even though it's very flawed.
I like where the story took me when it at the end, when it was resolved with just how they got there. I wasn't happy with, but at the end with it, I really enjoyed that with the 3 characters that it ends with. And so I was extremely happy with that, but wasn't so happy with how we got there. But ultimately, it's still an enjoyable movie. I think a lot of the flack that it's getting is because it's not a big action movie, and I think people are expecting that. But if you go into this expecting that, then you weren't paying attention to the other 2 films that came before it. So for my enjoyment, because I enjoyed it, even though I see a lot of its many flaws, I'm giving it a C+, man.
Okay, I'm going to give this a B-. All
right, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, we're right in that same realm, and I don't think this film is a bad film. I just think it needed more work. Like I just don't think. I think M. Night writes a pretty decent story, and he has really good ideas. He writes an okay script. I just don't think he's a fantastic director. I think is what it comes down to as far as like a filmmaker goes. I don't think he's ever really done anything spectacular behind the camera.
I mean, Unbreakable is an incredible piece of work.
It's really
the
not
choice of colors and keeping it grounded and having a different spin on superheroes.
And that was my thing here. Where was that color palette in this movie?
I know.
It was very bright.
It was.
Shooting in digital kind of hurts you a little bit, doesn't it?
It does sometimes.
All right, so that's going to do it for our 5-minute-ish review of Glass. If you want to reach out to us on Twitter or on Facebook, let us know if you agree with our review. If you saw Glass, let us know if you thought something different. You can reach out to us on Twitter at SuperMoviePod or on Facebook, Super Movie Bros Podcast on there. Jay, let's head over. Let's start drinking some beers, and let's get ready to welcome our guest.
All right.
Welcome back to the beer segment. Me and Jay got 2 beers that we are going to be reviewing for you, but before we do that, we got to drop a line to our sponsor, Blowfish. Blowfish is the only FDA-approved hangover cure. What it is, 2 tablets that you drop into 8 to 12 ounces of water, drink it down, and your hangover starts to feel better immediately. So if you spent a Sunday night watching the Cornetto trilogy, drinking 3 cocktails that were made by the Super Movie Bros, and you have a bit of a hangover going into work on Monday, then you're going to want to try Blowfish. You can check Blowfish out at 4hangovers.com and use our promo code SMBFISH to get your 15% off. All right, Jay, we got another indie spotlight to do, as we're going to be doing all year. And this one comes from our good friend Sean. Me and you actually met Sean in person when we went and saw his band play at John and Peter's in New Hope. And he's got a podcast. It's What Does It Matter podcast. This is a show. It's basically Seinfeld the podcast, if anything is going to be believed about their description for it.
Yeah, love it.
So they describe WDIM podcast as a weekly podcast about anything and everything: music, movies, books, life, the universe, and everything. So it's basically like our show, but aimless. But instead of me and Jay describing it to you, why don't we play a promo from them, and it could be explained to you by Sean himself.
What Does It Matter Podcast, a non-topical solution for your topical problems. Movies, pop culture, music, foul language, you got it. WDIMPodcast.blogspot.com. Also follow us on Twitter at WDIMPodcast. The fun never ends, and it's something real.
So that's what they're all about over there at the What Does It Matter podcast. So it's honestly a truly fun show. Like I said, it's kind of aimless. It's a little stream of conscious, but sometimes that is where you find the most bit of fun.
Absolutely.
So I have a great time listening to Sean every week, and you can too. Follow him over on his Twitter at WDIMPodcast, and make sure that you subscribe to him on iTunes or any podcatcher that you use to listen to podcasts. And if you can review the podcast on there, make sure that you write a review and leave some 5 stars for him if you're enjoying the show. All right, Jay, me and you got 2 beers that we are going to be reviewing here from the same brewery.
Yes, we are going back to the heartland of Pennsylvania. Middle of nowhere, St. Mary's, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, it's
and
about
this is Straub
it's
Brewing.
about 2.5 hours northeast of Pittsburgh.
Right.
It's about 5 hours from us.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's a little ways out there. It is the middle of nowhere. And reading a little bit of their history, this was a brew house that was started in 1872, and it was actually out of a house and what they called a brew house. So the owner actually lived on property, and that's how they brewed beer right up until the day he died. And then they leveled it and built an actual brewery right on top of it. So
yes, so they've been around since 1872 apparently, and it is certainly a lower end beer, David. It has that little musky, skunky kind of aroma.
Right. So looking on their website, they have won awards, but with beer and wine and liquor and stuff like that, there are so many different contests out there that it seems like almost everybody wins an award for something. Sometimes I feel like they're made up. I'm not saying that, because the beers that won awards for them, we're not drinking here. These aren't those beers that they won awards for. So maybe those beers are fantastic, but the ones that we have in our hand and we're putting down our throats tonight are not.
No.
So, Gad, which one are you drinking?
I have the Straub American Amber. It is 4.1 alcohol by volume. It definitely has more of a sweeter flavor to it, even though it has that kind of bubbly, singy kind of taste that leaves you a little flat. It has no good quality to it whatsoever. I actually kind of downed it because I was just completely sick and tired of the beer halfway through, and I'm gonna go not that low. I'm gonna probably go a 2 out of 5.
All right, and I am drinking the Straub American Lager. They describe this as an honestly fresh American lager brewed by Straub craftsmen in the northern Allegheny Mountains. And reading between the lines, an honestly fresh American lager. What they're saying is it's just classic, right? It is, but more so than that, like this, my grandmother used to drink Schaefer beer, and this smells and tastes a lot like Schaefer beer. It tastes a lot like a bad beer, and it does have that skunky smell and it even has like a skunky taste to it. But we know that they're fresh, when we open them up.
It was a loud one.
Yeah. These have to be drank extremely cold, like Coors, so you don't taste how bad they are.
Yeah.
And this honestly tastes like a German brewmaster pissed into a glass, handed it to me, and said, Prost. Because this beer is extremely pissy. I am not a big fan of it, and I'm not going to be as generous as you are. Man, it's a 1.5.
Yeah,
I am kind of interested. They do have the Wild Boy hopped lager that I would actually want to try, because I actually like the Yingling's hopped lager, their IPL, and hopped lagers are something that's kind of like growing and getting more popular, and I've liked quite a few of them, especially the Victory Homegrown Lager is a hopped lager, and that one is absolutely fantastic. classic. So I'm kind of interested in trying that one, but honestly, if these two are anything to go off of, not a big fan.
Stay away.
Yeah,
there's no point in buying these.
All right, so coming up next, we are going to be joined by our patron, Thomas Iannucci. He is the one that provides us our Trailer Park breakdown music. He got to assign us a top 5 list and was given the opportunity to join us because of the Patreon tier that he belongs to. So me, Jay, and Thomas are going to sit down and we are going to do our top 5 books to movies since 2000. Welcome back to our top 5. We're going to be getting into our top 5 favorite book to movie adaptations since the year 2000. So we had to start adding rules to this, Jay, because if we did top 5 books to movies ever,
right,
we would just basically have some of the greatest. We would be basically saying, like, these are the greatest movies that were ever made. Right. Jaws, Godfather, Blade Runner. Like, we could just run through so many things from the past 50, 60 years that were adapted from books to movies that it became ridiculous. So I started thinking what would make it a little harder, what would make it more of an interesting list. Everyone knows classic books. We had to read them in fucking high school, so we all know classic books. Let's do books that are not yet classics. Everything from the year 2000 on. So that's what we're doing. Books to movies from 2000 on. Now, this isn't anything that I had mentioned to either of the two guests that I have with me, but I didn't use comic books. Did anyone use comic books?
No.
All right, perfect. So no comic books either, because that's also just too easy. Just say,
seriously,
5 MCU movies, or maybe like 4 MCU movies, and then throw something else in there and be like, I'm done. Yeah. So I'm just trying to make it a little harder, but something where we can get some variety on our list, to get some meat on our list, to talk about some films that maybe me and Jay haven't talked about on the show before. And I didn't mention that this segment was given to us by our patron, one of our top tier patrons. We have 2 top tiers. It's the 10% ABV and the 15% ABV. I'm joined by the artist formerly known as the Ill-Italian, Thomas Iannucci. What is up, sir?
Hey, not much, man. I am so happy to be here. Really, really excited that we can do this one because I'm an avid reader, and so I'm very passionate about this. And of course, I love you guys, so this is going to be pretty fun.
Yeah, this is going to be exciting.
It's going to be a lot of fun. I think we have some interesting ones for our lists. I know Jay's never read any of the books that are attached to the movies that he's picked. He's practically illiterate. So.
That's true. Yeah.
And I have read probably all but, I think, 1 on my list. I think I've read all of them but 1 that are on my list. So, and I'm sure, Tom, you have read literally all the ones that are on your list, because you originally had a rule that we had to read all the books to movies that were going on the list.
And I was like, shit, I could think of 2, like Goosebumps and like Great Expectations.
Right. So I
was like, well, there was I read like parts of a certain book for a certain movie that nobody saw, The Libertine, but the Earl of Rochester, it was like so obscure.
Before we did the movie Cocktail for Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, you read some chapters from that.
Yes, but that didn't crack the 2000 to current movie.
Right. It does not. No. All right, gentlemen, now that everyone knows the rules that we were working with while making these lists, why don't we get started on naming off some of these? And if you've read the book, talk about a little bit about the book to movie differences, but what made you like both of them? Because that's what I tried to do with my list. I tried to put in things where it's like, I liked both of them, both the book and the movie as well. Exactly. So if sometimes I didn't like the movie as much as I liked the book, it didn't make the list, unfortunately.
I tried to choose something that I thought the book would be interesting to read.
Fair enough.
I put that in consideration. I wasn't just throwing out whatever I thought was my favorite movie, but the book could have been garbage, or I knew it was a beloved book. One of the two.
Sure. And can I just add really quick that the inspiration for this came from my nerd rage and terror over seeing the Artemis Fowl trailer a couple months ago. Yes, I was very late to the Harry Potter game, actually. It was within the last 7 years, I'd say. But Artemis Fowl was like my Harry Potter growing up. And just from the trailer alone, there were some really egregious differences that on the surface, I don't think they realize are going to radically change the plot for the entire rest of the series if they continue to pursue that and that sort of thing. And it got me thinking of, okay, well, what do I look for in a good adaptation of a book? And that's kind of how I came up with this.
All right, very good. All right, so let's start with you, Tom, man. You kick it off, man. What do you got?
Okay, so this is going to be a little controversial. And to be honest, right when we started getting ready for this, I thought of another book that probably should have been on here, but it's too late, so I'm going to stick with my list. So number 5, I have 2012's The Hunger Games.
I volunteer as tribute.
Okay.
Yes.
See, I don't like those movies, but
Right.
Well, I like the movies. I enjoyed them a lot more than, like, say, Twilight.
well, that's
Yes,
true. Yeah.
right, exactly. This is
Not on my list, so
Okay.
This definitely wouldn't have been on my all-time list.
Right.
And when I get to the honorable mentions, I may decide that this should have been on the honorable mentions instead, but this is what I did my research for.
Yeah, I considered it.
It was good. I really liked it. I love the book, but this is a little controversial, and what keeps it low on my list is that readers of the books were kind of divided. Like, my sister's a huge Hunger Game fan. The novel, hated the movies. I liked both. What I really liked was a few things. First of all, in the books, there's this overall sense of like bleakness.
Right.
Right. And they did a very good job of translating that well into the Hunger Games, as well as the, the outer districts and that sort of thing. They did a great job with that. And contrasting it very well with the opulence and excess of the capital, and almost the naivete that those people who have been so sheltered in that. Really
Can we just go back to that? You said naivete.
Sounds like something I would say.
You said it exactly like Jay would say it. Naivete.
As I swirl my
I didn't realize
martini,
we were joined by a French motherfucker right here. Jesus, man.
It could be Hawaiian slang.
Yeah.
Hey, he could be French Polynesian for all we know.
Right, yes. I'm not, but I could be.
Can't judge our patrons.
Italian Filipino, that's close to French Polynesian, right?
That's close. It's very close. Naivete.
I suppose I shouldn't have thought I could just get through and you'd let that slide.
It sounded nice.
Thank you, Jay. I like to think that I'm kind of like an in-between of you guys. I do have my more pretentious side, like Jay. I definitely have, no offense, but you know how we are. I also I have my nerdy side, like Dave. So I'm kind of like the in-between. If you guys were to Dragon Ball Z fusion together, you'd get me.
That's awesome.
Air.
Well, I'd love that beard. I'd just love to have that beard.
Yes. Well,
so
I'll teach you the secrets after the show. But yeah,
all right. So I'm so sorry to cut you off.
No. That's in a nutshell the way that they translated something so pervasive in the book. It is such a ethereal kind of like. How do you describe bleakness? You know what I mean? Like it just is. But they did a very good job capturing that.
They did,
and also
you capture it by hiring Christopher Nolan.
Right. Well, yes, which they didn't do, and they still managed to pull
David
it off
Fincher,
somehow.
or anyone who uses like that blue filter that makes everything seem cold.
All the Macklemore music videos, except for Thrift Shop, they did that very well. And the other thing they did really good was most of the casting. Katniss, portrayed by Jennifer Lawrence, was fantastic. Haymitch, Woody Harrelson was it really shocked me when I first heard about it, but he actually did a surprisingly good job. The best was is it Elizabeth Banks as Effie?
Oh yes. The announcer.
Yes,
perfect.
Yeah, she was like that was crazy. It was perfect. They lose a lot of points, in my opinion, for Josh Hutcherson as PETA.
Right, he was supposed to be like a pretty like buff guy, right?
That was the most controversial casting.
Yeah, it didn't really make any sense. And I'm a fan of his. He didn't do terrible, but even now, after the series is done, I don't get it. So that kind of holds it back. Such a glaring.
Right. I don't look at him and think that he can throw 50-pound bags of like flour over his head. Right.
He's supposed to be a gentle giant, right? And
I'm like twice his size, and like I can't even do that. So it's like, get out of here.
Yeah. Exactly. And you could see like the fake blonde hair. It was just a little.
Yeah,
I don't know what happened. He sucked some producer's dick or something. I don't know what happened, but it was bad casting. But again, like you said, he wasn't terrible acting wise.
He clearly didn't suck anyone's dick, Jay, because he wasn't nominated for a Golden Globe.
So that's how.
Little callback to last episode.
That's good. That's good.
All right, Jay, what is your number 5, man?
Mine is The Social Network.
Mark!
He's wired in.
Sorry?
He's wired in.
Is he?
Yes.
How about now? You still wired in?
Security.
Is based on The Accidental Billionaires by Ben Mesrich. And this one, the book came out in 2009, I believe.
Okay.
You know, Sorkin's, his dialogue that he writes in his screenplays are a lot. It's dense. It's very informative. It's got a lot of material, a lot of moving parts going on. And with Fincher's direction, I thought they just pulled this story along with so much detail, but a lot of information and a lot of through line that you can just see how these characters developed and grew, and their egos grew at the same time until the very end. And you got the shitstorm that is Facebook,
right?
Just exploded onto the scene, and how those characters are fallen at that point in their lives. And are they changed? No. I mean, a little bit perhaps, but not really. And it's just a really interesting character study movie when you really think about it, in many different facets. And I was really impressed by the movie, and I'm sure the book is equally, or if not more, informative and also exciting to read, because I'm sure there's a lot more information in the book than there was laid out in the film, because there's a lot of interesting background stories with the Wachowski, I believe that's their last names, the brothers, the twins. Mm-hmm. They had a big thing, and then all the other.
Are you talking about the Winklevoss twins?
Winklevoss, thank you.
Winklevoss.
It was something like that.
It's Armie Hammer, man. Come on.
I know Armie, but
Come on, man.
But no, so
I know you didn't read the book, but you've seen the movie.
Yes, I know. I forgot the last name.
There are only major plot points in the movie.
Winklevoss.
Winklevoss, yeah.
Yes.
It sounds as pretentious as you sound. Like their name is as pretentious
and they
as
are.
You. They are.
They row and crew at Harvard.
All right. So my number 5, Jay, it comes from Philip K. Dick. Now, I'm going to be honest, this technically isn't a book. It's not a novel. Mm-hmm. This is a publication from the Fantastic Universe Science Fiction, basically publication magazine, where people would submit short stories, and a lot of Philip K. Dick stories went into this science fiction publication. But in that is the short story for Minority Report, which is came up on a lot of, people's top Spielberg lists. I mean, Jay brought it up on his top 5 Spielberg movies. It's probably one of the few movies, post 2000 or like post Schindler's List for Spielberg where I'm like, I fucking love it. So I really enjoyed Minority Report. There are just some really cool visuals in that movie, but also it paints a world that I'm like,
Well, let's not kid ourselves. We are arresting individuals who have broken no law.
But they will. The commission of the crime itself is absolute metaphysics. The precongs see the future, and they're never wrong.
But it's not the future if you stop it. Isn't that a fundamental paradox?
Yes, it is. You're talking about predetermination, which happens all the time. Why'd you catch that?
Because it was going to fall.
You're certain?
Yeah.
But it didn't fall. You caught it. The fact that you prevented it from happening doesn't change the fact that it was going to happen.
We could be heading there someday. Like, we could be heading to maybe not like the whole precognition thing, but arresting people who have a predisposition for committing crimes. And this is what people were worried about when they started criminal profiling. They were worried that like the FBI and the CIA was going to start profiling people before they'd even commit crimes and started locking them up. So it has like some real world basis to it. But what an awesome action movie. And it is one of my favorite Tom Cruise movies. It's a fantastic Spielberg movie. And it's just kind of like that modern Spielberg. And it's modern Spielberg at its best. So I really, really love the movie.
It's a great choice.
Yeah. And
dang, that's a good one, man.
There's a lot of things like on my list, and we'll go through some of them in honorable mentions. I'll bring them up before we finish out. That like this narrowly made it on my list, because when I go through my honorable mentions, you'll be like, how did anything beat some of that stuff? But there's reasons for it. All right, Tom, what do you got for your number 4, man?
Okay, so this is going to be, again, a little controversial, but I want to change it up. I want to do stuff that was different. And again, to cover my butt here, I am saying that I had to have read the book and the movie just in my personal criteria. So if I left something off, I probably didn't read the book. But with that said, number 4, and I didn't write down when this came out, but Holes.
You're not digging holes no more? Huh?
I'm teaching him how to read.
What?
He's a smart kid.
Smart? Oh, yeah? Hey, Zero. What does C-A-T spell? Huh? What's it spell? Yeah, he's a real genius.
Originally by Louis Sacker, and starring Shia LaBeouf pre-meltdown.
Do it!
Yes, as well as John Voight and Sigourney Weaver.
Yeah.
This, to me, the reason, I mean, part of it is the fact that this came out, in my childhood.
Right. This book was a bigger deal than the movie was. I remember when the movie came out, people were going nuts because, it is a very popular young adult novel that people loved. And the movie was serviceable, too. And the movie wasn't bad at all. Disney, I believe it was a Disney movie because LaBeouf was under Disney control at that point.
At the time, yes.
So still in the Even Stevens phase of his career.
Yes, and it shows, but he did it well. The reason why I like this, and maybe this is just a little bit of bias, but personally, I do a lot of writing as well. And the author, Louis Sacker, wrote and adapted the entire screenplay. And I know he had a very big say in creative control of how the movie was adapted, and it shows. The book has such a weird mixture of this whimsical, kind of strange but funny, sort of quirky humor, but also this dark undertone at the same time. There are some murders in the past, reference and that sort of thing. And it's captured very, very well in the film. The quirky dialogue is great. John Voight had possibly his last good role in this movie.
Yeah.
He's certainly the best I can remember.
He's good in Ray Donovan on that TV show, but but movie wise, I don't know.
Jay, you loved Anaconda.
That was 98, I think, or something.
But it was on your so bad it's good list, right?
That's true.
Right.
That is true.
All right, man. Good choice, man. I remember when Holes came out. It was a big deal. I've seen the movie, never read the book. But I do remember enjoying the movie. It's nothing that I'm in love with, but I do remember enjoying the movie.
No, I definitely enjoyed the movie. Absolutely.
For what it was.
And it still holds up because I know kids at work, they still watch that movie. It's people know it, man. It's a classic. Yeah.
All right, Jay, what's your number 4?
It is $1 Million Baby.
You go hit the bag. Stop.
What'd I do wrong?
Okay, you did 2 things wrong. 1 is you asked a question, and 2 is you asked another question.
So this is a book from 2000, Rope Burns, Stories from the Corner.
You do know that only the movie had to come out in the year past the year 2000. The book could have come out whenever, right?
I'm just saying when the book came out.
Okay, fair enough.
The movie came out in 2004, but the book came out in 2000.
Fair enough.
By FX Tool. So it sounds like, I'm not 100% sure, it says Stories from the Corner. So I don't know if it's short stories throughout this whole book of different stories from the boxing world.
Guess you'd have to read it to know.
That's true. So there you go. But anyway, so $1 Million Baby. It is one of my favorite Clint Eastwood movies. Yeah. I thought he did an impeccable job.
It's Rocky from the female perspective until the third act.
And god awful depressing. Yeah. But yet you can depressing. And I don't even want to get into the depressing stuff, but they really handle it very well.
She chews her own tongue off and tries to choke on her own blood.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But choosing to pull the plug, I mean, spoiler alert, but it's and that's, as hard as that was for him, you can understand why she wanted it done, and also why he had to do it, because he loved her and it's what she wanted. It was her choice.
Well, it was really topical at the time that it came out, because I believe Washington State had just passed a law that they could do physician assisted suicide at the same time, and there was a lot of debate about whether about the ethics of it, about whether it was right or wrong for a doctor who takes a Hippocratic oath to end someone's life, and at what point does a person have the choice to end their own life? And
it's a touchy
by
subject.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And there was a big political debate going on at the time, and this movie kind of like came along, and I'm in agreement that I feel like if someone wants to end their life due to terminal illness or something like she suffered, I get it. But I wouldn't say like, a 22-year-old kid can walk into the hospital and be like, I want to commit physician-assisted suicide.
Absolutely.
There's got to be caveats to it and stuff like that. But this movie started a conversation, and it came out at a time when this conversation was hitting like a fever pitch. So I remember it more so because of what was going on around it, more so than the film itself.
Which is interesting because you're right. It is the very final 20 minutes, and then
it's the third act.
Throughout the whole rest of the movie, you have a whole different kind of other
just pick the fucking stool up. God damn it, pick the stool up. They told you so many times. Get the stool out of the ring. Get it out of the ring.
Yeah.
God damn it. All right, Jay. My number 4. This is the only Stephen King that I'm going to have on my list. It is The Mist.
It's from them. The blood of human sacrifice must come from them. The blood of expiation.
Come on. You try it.
Fucking try it! Come on.
We want the boy.
It was directed by Frank Darabont. And dude, I love this movie. It's like one of those like undersung movies that like I feel like
one of the great endings.
I feel like a lot of people missed it. Right. And that's the most memorable thing to me is the ending. The ending sticks with you, which is amazing because the novella doesn't have that ending. The novella ends with and they drove off into the mist. And that's it. It just ends there.
Crazy.
Right, which is that's a serviceable ending for a horror novel. Like that works. It works because the story was all happening inside that supermarket.
Right.
But Frank Darabont decided that he couldn't end a movie with that a film audience would not be happy with that ending because that's almost like, he wakes up and he was in a dream the whole time. It's just as bad as that. So he writes this ending where, and I don't really want to spoil it for anybody because I'm sure people who have listened to it have seen it, but maybe they haven't. And if you haven't, I really encourage you to see The Mist because the way it ends is shocking, horrible, and it makes you want to.
It's terrible.
Makes you kind of want to like curl up in a ball for a little while.
Oh, it does.
Maybe
It
drink a
certainly
little.
does.
Maybe drink a little chamomile tea and calm yourself
I still
down.
come back to that ending. Just like last week, I think I was thinking about that, and just like it haunts me even still.
It does, but like the real great part of both the book and the novel are like this mini like Dark Ages society that gets
Lord
built
of
in
the
there.
Flies a little bit.
Oh my God, and like how everyone they feel like it's the end for them, so they're grasping at straws and they look to religion. They go to like the most religious person that's there, and it turns out she's fucking batshit crazy. And like. Anytime I hear the word expiation, like my anus puckers, like I fucking pucker because I'm like, oh my God, someone is gonna die. Like, are we gonna sacrifice somebody? Like, is that what's happening? God. Don't use the word expiation ever because it makes me like pucker. Such a good movie. Definitely
great pick.
Definitely want people to check it out. I'm gonna be honest, I just bumped something off of my list during everyone's number 5 because I remembered that. And I bumped something else off of my list to fit that on there. So, all right, Tom, we're back to you, man.
Sure. Okay. So this is where it got hard for me. But, and also, if I pick something from a series, I only chose one from that series. Otherwise, I could just do like the entire Harry Potter.
I did the same thing, right? Yeah, you could do
So
5 of 7 Harry Potter movies.
Right, exactly. And on my next list, we're gonna do the other 2. So I chose for number 3, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix.
Think of it this way: every great wizard in history has started out as nothing more than what we are now. Students.
All right. Me and you have debated this before. We've talked about which one was the best movie. So
it's so hard. But what's funny is maybe after the first 2, from like the 3rd book onward, they get a lot longer and a lot darker. And of those, it's generally regarded that Order of the Phoenix is probably the weakest of the Harry Potter books. And it's definitely the longest. It might be the weakest, definitely the longest. And
it's even longer than Deathly Hallows?
Yes, it is. It's actually the longest of the books. I looked it up to make sure.
Oh my God.
Yeah, which is crazy. And it definitely shows at times. I love it, but it definitely feels long at times. But it becomes the shortest of the Potter films, or one of the shortest. And David Yates, I think this movie came out in 2007. David Yates did such a great job of getting to like all the good stuff in that novel and cutting out all the fat. This is the novel where Harry definitely goes into his angsty hormonal period, and
it's where Harry becomes Peter Parker. Yeah,
right, exactly. And he's a poor man's Peter Parker for sure. And
is this your?
Now,
can I ask you is this your favorite book in the series?
No. It's his favorite movie in the series.
But it's just your favorite movie in the series.
It's probably one of the weaker books in the series, which is very interesting.
But you think this was the best transition from book to film? Okay.
I would say it's probably the best adaptation because for me, a big thing is, does it stay true to the overall, is it faithful to, if not the plot, like the overall essence of the story, and does it improve on it in any way? And this is like,
I like that. I like the fact that you put it on your list because the movie improves on the literature.
Yes, which is hard to do.
I'm sorry, let me say it like you. In the literature.
Literature. Yes, the French cinema. But sorry to any French listeners out there.
Just don't call movies pictures, because that's what Jay does, and you can never be as pretentious as Jay.
No, I'm not quite there. Yes, I do call them films sometimes. But so they improved on it. Getting to see stuff like the fight scene between Voldemort and Dumbledore translated pretty much beat for beat from the book into the movie, and it still is amazing to watch. That sort of stuff. It was just such a fantastic job of adaptation, so it's definitely very high on my list.
Awesome. Jay, what is your number 3, man?
Gone Girl.
Nick loved a girl I was pretending to be. Cool girl. Men always use that, don't they, as their defining compliment. She's a cool girl. Cool girl is hot. Cool girl is game. Cool girl is fun. Cool girl never gets angry at her man. She only smiles in a chagrin-loving manner and then presents her mouth for fucking.
Nice. So this is the 2012 book from Gillian Flynn, who also wrote the movie from her book that came out. The movie came out in 2014, so it was right afterwards.
Just rewatched this. Holds up.
Yeah, it certainly does. I've watched it probably 3 times.
It's probably the reason Jay is not married to this day.
I'll tell you. But it's one of those.
I could picture you as Ben Affleck's character.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, like you are, and this is no offense.
That's what's so scary.
You were just naive enough.
Yes.
You were just naive enough to fall for a crazy bitch like this.
Because I would. Those would be the girls that I would fall head over heels for.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, I'll settle down with you.
It is.
Yeah. Of all the girls.
Till death do us
and
part.
the movie, like, it plays out like a book almost in some ways.
It does,
which is kind of interesting.
It's very chaptery. It feels,
but it's
like.
It's similar to like a Fincher style because it is directed by Fincher. But I mean, as far as his taste and flavor and how he likes to roll out movies, I loved it, and I thought the twists were really well done.
They felt earned, which is nice.
Executed. Rosamund Pike nailed it. Great casting. That was the most important casting of the whole movie.
Let's give it up to Neil Patrick Harris, Mr. NPH.
Yes.
Playing it up as a straight man and making me fucking believe it. Loved it.
And I did. Again, shocking.
Yeah.
Shocking.
Right. But I mean, I think what's the thing that stands out the most is just the lengths that she was willing to go to, like from a character perspective.
And then after a certain point, she realized she had to do as well. Like she realized she had to do this.
I remember that moment that like she takes the red wine and splashes it on her crotch and then runs over to the corner and starts like screaming
in front of the camera. Yeah.
I mean, great acting job. Don't get me wrong, but like just from a character's perspective,
she knew her situation and she knew what she had to do to get out of that situation. Essentially, to move on, move up in her world or her rankings or whatever the hell she wanted to do in her life. Fucked up girl. Whoo boy.
All right, man.
But great movie, and I'm sure it's a great book.
All right. I'm sure it got some reads.
Yeah, I'm sure it got some reads. It might have gone on the bestseller list somewhere, you know.
All right, man. My number 3 is a Harry Potter film. So just
nice.
It is my favorite Harry Potter film. And it is my favorite Harry Potter book, which is why it makes it on the list.
I think I know which one this is.
I'm not a huge Potter fan, but I liked this book so much, and I liked the characters in it so much that I thought I had to bring it up. It's Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban.
Yep.
Expecto Patronum!
That was my second choice.
It's my favorite book. It's my favorite movie in that series, and Sirius Black is my favorite character from all of Harry Potter. So his introduction to this, you know, the mystery that is put up around it, which the book did a better job with the mystery of the werewolf more so than the movie does. The movie made it pretty obvious that the man's name is Professor fucking Lupin. So and he has scratches on his face, and I'm like, that's the guy. That's the. In the book, there was a little bit more mystery to that, where they threw a little shade where it could have been a few other characters as well. But I really enjoyed it, and I think this probably has, other than Deathly Hallows, has like one of the most bleakest tones to it in any of the Harry Potter movies. I still kind of get choked up a little bit when Harry is standing there and he's like, my father's Patronus is going to come and it's going to save me and stuff like that. And I'm like, dude, it's not fucking coming. It's like, put your hopes back in the box. Put your hopes back in the box. That shit ain't happening. But I love the confidence that gave him the second he realizes that that's not happening. You know, he remembers in that moment that he is something that Voldemort fears, and he is something that everyone else looks up to, and he looks inside himself and realizes he has the power to release that Patronus, and he does it. And I love that scene. Love it so much. So
good.
It's weird that like maybe like that scene is the reason that this makes it into my list, but I do love it, and I have a huge love for Buckbeak. So I got really mad that Buckbeak doesn't show up more in the Harry Potter movies.
A shining moment.
That whole chasing of the Harrys in Deathly Hallows Part 1. Why wasn't someone riding Buckbeak, man?
Yeah, that actually is a great question.
You introduce these cool things and you take them away from me. It's one of the things I never liked about the Harry Potter series. It's like
time turners,
right? Yeah, in my mind, I'm just like, there's a time turner. Why is anybody worried about anything? Oh, Cedric.
I know.
Cedric Diggory's dead. Someone get the time turner. Someone get the time turner.
So
Cedric's
they'll let her
dead.
use it. They'll let Hermione use it to go to more classes, but they won't bring anyone back to life.
But they won't bring a kid who's killed by Wizard Hitler. They won't bring him back
those
to
are the breaks. Sometimes it just.
So time turners are legal magic. We can only give them to little girls who need to learn more. We can't right the wrongs of the universe. We can only give them
kill magical Hitler.
We can only give them the filthy mugbloods so that they can learn more. Oh man, so maybe I got to do a Harry Potter show, like I do a certain point of view where I talk about all the pitfalls and all the little things in Star Wars that don't make sense. Me and Tom should do one about Harry Potter.
I'm so down.
Where it doesn't make sense.
100%.
All right, so that was my number 3. Tom, man, what do you got for your number 2?
Okay, so this is my number 2, and this and my number 1 were so close that I'm going back and forth, and I'm actually switching it right now. This was originally my number 1. It just depends on the day.
Hey, Azkaban was my number 2.
And obviously it depends on the moment too, right?
But I just switched it to number 3. Yeah. So
this is one of my favorite films of all time. 2005's Pride and Prejudice.
Is he amiable?
Who? Is he handsome? Who? He's sure to be handsome. With 5,000 a year, it would not matter if he had warts and a leer. Who's got warts?
I will give my hearty consent to his marrying whichever of the girls he chooses.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
You mean Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies, right?
No.
Because that's the only version of Pride and Prejudice I've read.
Well, it's actually mostly faithful to the original, so that's not too far off. So it's funny. I'm usually not even really a big romance guy either, but something about this. It's so interesting because the book written by Jane Austen is over 200
romance
years
in
old.
tone and in period. It was written, for Christ's sakes.
Yeah, seriously. Everything about it. It just doesn't seem like anything that it's usually not what I enjoy. But although, I do love a good period piece. But it's over 200 years old, and yet it's still such a relatable, such a relevant story even today. It has such a powerful story. And
well, let's face it, sociopolitically, women's station in society has only now just beginning to turn forward. So
yeah, seriously,
this was very relevant for a very long time because women were not treated great in society. You know, even now they're still not treated fairly.
Yeah,
but
seriously,
we're getting there.
Yeah, and you know. Yeah, that's so true. But yeah, so the adaptation wise, this was something that was very big to me. So I love the book. And it's a long book, but it's a pretty quick read. The movie's not super long, but what they did again, like Order of the Phoenix, is they really streamlined it. There's a lot of internal monologue, from the main character, Lizzie, that kind of gets clipped out, but not so much that you don't know what's going on. It's just such a beautifully shot film. The cinematography and the use of lights, especially in the dream sequences, is just lovely. It's gorgeous to look at. And overall, you know, the tone, it's still funny. They don't change too much of the language, but you can still understand what they're talking about, even though it's like 18th century English. But it's very witty. It's very engaging. The big thing for me is they found a way to improve on what is probably the climactic moment of the entire plot, which is the confession of love between the two main characters in the book. And I suppose this is probably because it was written by a woman in the 18th century and their sense of propriety was much different. They were very reserved about emotions and feelings. So in the book, that big climactic moment where they declare love for each other is just kind of glanced over, and she gives you a summary. It's very anticlimactic. It was very strange. And when I read it, I was so shocked. In the movie, it's a very powerful, moving thing. It's a big payoff, you know, and they really paint what you had wanted to see visually that you didn't get in the book. And for me, improving on probably the most pivotal moment in the entire book.
Well, I think Jane Austen did that intentionally because she doesn't want the entire character arc of a character to be tied, of a female character to be tied to a romance.
Sure. Yeah. And of course, there is more nuance in the book. Just that's how it goes. But they did such a good job of that. And Keira Knightley as Lizzie is just phenomenal, and she is such a strong character. She bucks so many traditions and norms without coming off as abrasive or unlikable at any point. Even when she's making decisions that don't always make sense, you can see where she's coming from. I think it's Matthew McFadden as Mr. Darcy and Donald Sutherland as the father, Mr. Bennett. All of them, it was like, I struggle to think of a more perfect casting situation. Like everybody was like right on the money. And I really was very taken with the way they adapted that movie into or film and book into a film.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great choice because I've heard nothing but similar as viewpoints from what you have. I mean, people love that book. People love that movie. I mean, it's just so beloved.
My wife's one of them. Keira Knightley is like her favorite actress. She loves Keira Knightley. So damn good pick, man. Thank you. Don't try to make this show too highbrow, Tom. I mean, you listen to us, right? Like you are a fan, I assume. So.
Oh yes.
Don't try to elevate us to new levels, sir.
I also had holes on my list, so you know.
That's true.
Good point.
That's true. Fair enough. Jay, what is your number 2, man?
The girl with the dragon tattoo.
I knew it was gonna be on your list.
And if I find the girl in here with you, whether she came of her own free will or not. No, not a video. I'll kill you. Do you doubt anything I've said? Do you doubt what's in the reports that have followed me around all my life? What do they say? If you had to sum it up, they say I'm insane.
Can we go an episode without you mentioning the girl with the dragon tattoo?
Every other episode, you know. So this is from the book series from 2005. There's 3 books in the series: the girl with the dragon tattoo, the girl who played with fire, and the girl who kicked the hornet's nest. Now, the Swedish film series was fantastic. Really adored it. Really loved it. Obviously, I absolutely loved the Fincher remake. And unfortunately,
the Claire Foy movie.
It did not continue on. And they made this Girl in the Spider's Web movie with Claire Foy, which was atrocious.
Which is also based on a book.
You don't care. It was terrible.
It's in the same series.
Don't care. Seriously, it was just I don't want to think about that movie ever again. Really disappointing. The books I hear were fantastic. I know a lot of people have read them, absolutely love the series. We're really excited about the movies coming out. They saw the movies, loved the Swedish versions. They really were. This is when I was talking about that movie when it came out, when Fincher remade it. And it's just so dense with a really lot of mystery and murder intrigue. And then it kind of throws into a lot of different kind of curveballs with different character development with Lisbeth and, you know, her development as her, you know, as a fucked up background with her as a child, you know, being abused and then coming up the ranks and being genius with technology and investigation, and how that kind of played off.
And that reverse rape scene.
And that was big. That was huge.
That revenge rape scene.
It paid off in the movie as well. And absolutely. I'm sure it did in the book.
It 100% sure it did. Now you have me stumped, man, because I had this pegged for your number one. I'm not going to lie. You talk about the movie so much, I thought that this would be your number one on this list. So now I'm wondering whether you have Ian Fleming for Casino Royale on your list because your love of Bond, or whether you have...
No, this is going to be the biggest surprise.
Or whether you have the Bourne, one of the Bourne series on there. Huh. You got me stumped. All right, well, my number two is a book by P.D. James, and it's called The Children of Men.
The Human Project gives this great big dinner for all the scientists and sages in the world. They're tossing around theories about the ultimate mystery. Why are women infertile? Why can't we make babies anymore? Some of them say it's genetic experiments, gamma rays, pollution, same old, same old. Anyway, in the corner, this Englishman's sitting. He hasn't said a word. He's just tucking into his dinner. So they decide to ask him. They say, well, why do you think we can't make babies anymore? And he looks up at them, and he's chewing on this great big wing. And he says, I haven't the faintest idea, he said. But this stalk is quite tasty, isn't it?
Ooh. Obviously got made into one of me and Jay's favorite movies from the mid-2000s, Children of Men.
Choice.
Fantastic. Alfonso Cuarón directed movie. Wonderfully beautiful movie. Wonderfully,
it's a masterpiece.
You know, this is one of those things where it's like I saw the movie, found out they made a book about it, read the book, and then went, do like the movie better. But I think it's because Alfonso Cuarón's just visuals just sucked me in so much. You want to talk about bleak, you know, you guys are talking about these bleak worlds and stuff like that. I can't think of anything more bleak than what is portrayed in this movie, while still finding time to add beauty as well. Because we've talked about it before, that scene where the baby is born, there's fighting in the streets, there's fighting in the halls of the apartment building that the baby's born in. It all just stops when everyone hears the cry of a baby, something that no one has heard in 20, 30 odd some years. And they allow Clive Owen's character to just kind of like walk through the apartment with the baby, and then the second he's out of earshot, the second people can't hear that baby crying anymore, a punch gets thrown, a grenade gets thrown, you know, gunshots start going off again, and the world just turns back to chaos. And it like, to me, like, that's human nature, right? Like, we can stop and appreciate beauty as human beings, and I think that's what makes us human beings, is that we can appreciate things like that. But in the end, we're still fucking animals, and we will always find a way to pit ourselves against something and fight. And that just seems to be like what we all want to do. No matter who you are, no matter what you do, you always wind up fighting something and spending more time doing that than appreciating the beauty of the world. And I fucking love the movie. The book was really good as well. And I just looking at all the ones that I could have put on the list, I go back to this one and I couldn't not put it on the list. All right. So before we get into our number ones, I want to go around the horn real quick. And for people just to name off some honorable mentions, you don't have to go into too great of detail. Just mention some of the stuff that almost made your list, but couldn't. So we'll start with you, Tom. What honorable mentions do you have?
So Azkaban was on my honorable mentions list. And the big one that is on my honorable mentions that I'm kicking myself for forgetting until now is The Great Gatsby. Lord of the Rings, the Two Towers.
I mean, that's okay, because the movie that came out a couple years ago wasn't as good as the Robert Redford version of Great Gatsby.
That's what I've heard. I still haven't got to see that one.
Yeah, don't bother with it. Just watch the Robert Redford one again.
Another one that didn't get like the best reviews, but I thought was very underrated was actually Prince Caspian. And then I just want to say dishonorable mention, the two most egregious adaptations ever, Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief and Aragon. Destroyed my childhood.
Sorry, man. I know your love of young adult because that's where you started reading with young adult stuff. So I get that. But hey, I hear the Maze Runner movies are actually good, even though no one goes and sees them.
They actually are,
and they're pretty faithful. So I kind of want to pick up that series because it seems pretty. I saw the original Maze Runner, but I did not see the subsequent 3 that they've made since then.
Dang, how did I forget that? That's on my honorable mention too. Totally spaced on that.
Fair enough. Yeah. Jay, honorable mentions, man. What do you got?
I didn't have any marked down, but you did mention a couple, and Children of Men is definitely on that list.
All right.
There's a lot of good ones out there.
All right, you ready for this list?
Yes.
It's going to be a little long, but I'm not going to do much explanation for each of them. So the first one, American Psycho, written by Bret Easton Ellis, and I love Bret Easton Ellis. I've read, the books that were made into movies is what I've read pretty much. I've read Less Than Zero, The Rules of Attraction, written by Bret Easton Ellis, which has a lot of ties to American Psycho in the fact that it is.
I love that movie.
It is basically about Sean Bateman, the little brother of Patrick Bateman, who is the star of American Psycho. And I love the movie too. I mean, this is one of those movies that I spent a long time. People tell me it was fantastic. It's so good. You got to watch it. It got built up in my head so much that I didn't want to watch it. Finally, I think Jay is the one who got me to watch it.
Get out.
And I really enjoyed it. So the next one is No Country for Old Men by Cormac McCarthy. Yes. Fantastic movie, fantastic book. Cormac McCarthy is probably one of the most prolific writers that we have out there today, just writing fantastic stories with deep characters.
Absolutely.
And I don't have The Road on here because I wasn't a fan of the movie as much as I was the book, so The Road doesn't make the honorable mentions. Another honorable mention, it's kind of a funny story. This was I really enjoyed this movie. This makes it on my list though because the author of the book is Ned Vizzini. He's related to me. Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Crazy.
So
I forgot
about that. So he's actually a sociologist for adolescents and stuff like that. He writes
a nice movie.
Right. He writes a lot of nonfiction. He writes a lot of nonfiction books, but this is one of his fiction books that kind of puts you in the headspace of a young teenager who's going through some stuff. And I thought that it spoke volumes, and I'm putting it on here because we're related. So
Dude, that's wild, man.
Casino Royale by Ian Fleming. It started the entire Bond thing. How can you not pay homage to that? Lord of the Rings. Boring. Is on my honorable mention because I don't love the movies. I find them boring. When I read the books, I'm not bored. I'm not bored because everything that's being described to me, I'm picturing in my head. When I have it laid out in front of me in the movies, I find myself just being bored by a 3-hour-long movie, just waiting for that battle to start. that's really what it comes down to. Gone Girl, which Jay had. Gone Baby Gone by Dennis Lehan. That's a book that I actually like more than the movie, but the movie's pretty solid as well. That's it. But we're ready for everyone's number ones. So, Tom, real quick, what is your number one book to movie since 2000?
Since 2000, for me, I'm going to have to come out against you guys on this, and I got to go with The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring.
What's that? This, my friend, is a pint. It comes in pints. I can get you one.
So that's the only Lord of the Rings I truly like. So let's hear it.
It was the best one, I'd say. I know that Return of the King probably gets the most hype.
But that one had 6 endings. So Fellowship of the Ring had 1.
Right, yeah. And
it has the best line in the entire series. One does not simply walk into Mordor.
Certainly has achieved meme immortality.
Yes. And a Sean Bean death scene. Who doesn't love to watch Sean Bean die? I think we all do.
So much. Seriously. But so Fellowship of the Ring is also by far the most faithful adaptation book to movie. They make some changes, particularly in the Two Towers, that affect how Return of the King comes out. This one was, aside from the beginning, most of the changes here were for pacing, believe it or not. Even at 3 hours, it could have been like 6 hours. And again, what they did, as long as the movie was, they did streamline it very well. The cinematography, again, the sweeping shots, just New Zealand as a setting was perfect. All of the characters, for the most part, were perfectly cast, making the hobbits, who I never really cared for much in the books, to be honest,
Well, that's what I say. In the movie, they bring Merry and Pippin forward much earlier in Fellowship of the Ring than they do in the books. They have their own chapters, their own storyline in the second book. But in the first book, they're very much background characters. They're not really there a whole lot. But they brought them forward here so that we could care about them more in the second one. And goddamn, Peter Jackson did such a fantastic job with these movies. Everything looks so gorgeous. God, it's so boring sometimes.
Definitely, I understand that. I'm a guy who I read most of the books I read are either like historical stuff or fantasy, or when I was a kid, the young adults, and usually young adult movies are the one of those three that get turned into movies that are good. That's why they're overrepresented on my list. But I do have a little bit more patience, I think, than the average reader. But even with that said, just everything going on, I get sucked in. Like, it's one of these places where they really brought Middle Earth to life.
No matter what, me and Jay wouldn't have Game of Thrones if this didn't
100%.
exist. It is the biggest influence on George R.R. Martin ever. He
just look at his name. Yeah,
right. And right. George Railroad Martin. He pays a lot of homage to these in the Game of Thrones novels more so than the TV show. They don't have time on the TV show, but I think it's a great pick, man. It's perfectly placed at your number one because it's influenced so much, both in film and culture, and in culture and in
literature, modern film,
and in Academy Awards.
Yeah,
that too.
Jay, what's your number one, man? What do you got?
Big surprise, probably for a lot of people. Silver Linings Playbook.
The fuck? Stupid fucking book. I just can't believe Nikki's teaching that book to the kids. I mean, it's the whole time. Let me just break it down for you. The whole time you're rooting for this Hemingway guy to survive the war and to be with the woman that he loves, Catherine Barkley.
It's 4 o'clock in the morning, Pat.
And he does. He does. He survives the war. After getting blown up, he survives it, and he escapes to Switzerland with Catherine. But now Catherine's pregnant. Isn't that wonderful? She's pregnant. And they escape up into the mountains, and they're going to be happy, and they're going to be drinking wine, and they dance. They both like to dance with each other. There's scenes of them dancing, which was boring, but I liked it because they were happy. You think he ends it there? No. He writes another ending. She dies, Dad. I mean, the world's hard enough as it is, guys. It's fucking hard enough as it is. Can't somebody say, hey, let's be positive? Let's have a good ending to the story?
Wow.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yes. This is a 2008 novel. This movie came out in, I believe, 2014.
Your love of Bradley Cooper knows no bounds, does it? Your number one movie is A Star is Born, and in your number one here is Silver Linings Playbook. Should we just dethrone Ryan Gosling now and have you start gargling the balls of Bradley Cooper?
He took over the storyline on Place Beyond the Pines from Gosling, so I kind of just went with Gosling, then went with Cooper, then DeHaan's next now probably coming. No, I don't know.
No, your love affair with Dane DeHaan is over after Valerian. You're done.
It's over.
And the Cure for Wellness, you're done with Dane DeHaan.
It peaked at In Treatment.
Yeah, exactly.
His first thing ever.
All right, man. So what is it about Silver Linings Playbook, man?
Yeah. So David O. Russell adapted this novel, and it rung true for him because he has a son who does have mental illness, and
he's bipolar,
right, and played by Bradley Cooper. And I thought the dynamic of the family, and also being in Philadelphia, I got a lot of good
absolutely
flavor from that, mostly from Bradley Cooper, probably putting that into the script and into the story because he's from our area as well.
Well, to go back to our question that happened at the beginning of, we were asked Pacino or De Niro. De Niro, look at him in this movie.
Yeah.
De Niro's
He was Philadelphia all the way.
Fantastic in this movie.
100%.
I look at him and I'm just like, I probably have 3 Guido uncles who are exactly like him.
I was going to say, he would fit right into the Vizzini household, yeah.
Oh my God.
Absolutely. And it's just and it's a beautiful romance. There's a lot of a fun comedy elements thrown into it. The way the story and the characters put them together and how they kind of bat each other apart, but then come together at the end.
And that dance scene.
And the dance scene is just so fun and awkward, but yet still beautiful and poignant. And, and it's just a beautiful marriage. I mean, I was one of those things where you got the Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone pairing. You have the Bradley Cooper and Jennifer Lawrence pairing. I feel like they are just great together.
My favorite scene is when Jennifer Lawrence walks into their house for the first time and she basically convinces Robert De Niro's character that everything good that happens when Bradley Cooper's character is with her.
Right.
I love that scene. Because she's the type of crazy bitch that researched all that shit before she went over there just to make that point.
Yeah, because she knows what she was walking into. She came prepared, and she's just as crazy as well. Yeah. I mean, it's an extremely deep movie with a lot of different elements and themes thrown into it, but it worked. And it shouldn't have worked. It could have easily not worked, but it really did. And I absolutely love the movie. It's very rewatchable. And because it's also a Philadelphia movie, I definitely put that a lot of weight under that belt. But a beautiful movie.
Where's that Freddie Mitchell jersey?
I love it. I know.
All right, Jay. All right, my number one, and this is one that I know I might catch some flack for because this film came out recently, 2018.
Okay.
It's one of my favorite books of recent times. I'm actually rereading it right now as we speak, which is why I said it might be the reason that it's number one on my list, because I'm just falling in love with it all over again. After we did our top 5 of 2018, I was a little remiss that I didn't fit this on here. I didn't think the movie was that strong, but I fucking love Ernest Cline's Ready Player One.
Citizens of the Oasis, I am Parzival, first to the key. I'm here talking to all of you now because our future is being threatened by people who will stop at nothing to win this contest. Some of you already know this, and you've lost much more than just your avatars or your weapons. Some have lost their freedom. Some have lost their lives. I only came here to escape the shitty hand that life dealt me. But I stayed, like many of you, because I found something much bigger than just myself. I found a cause. I found my friends. And yes, I know it's kind of a groaner, but I found love. And I don't want to lose that to this colossal douchebag, Nolan Sorrento.
Activate the Iron Giant.
I absolutely love it. I've actually watched the movie 2 or 3 times in January. I've watched it about 2 or 3 times already. I love the movie because the movie has so many references in it, and I've been watching it so many times that I'm just trying to pick out all these beautiful references that are in there that just pay homage to everything that I love, that's geek culture. And the book, I'll be honest, is probably a little bit too geek for me. It gets into video games more than I ever could. It's more about, the Atari 2600 age and cabinet games. That's stuff that I have cursory knowledge of, but I'm not really into. But when you get into the movie, everything they reference in there is all the stuff that I know now and love now. So I still love the novel for its story and everything like that, and I get the references, but I don't geek out over the references in the novel as much as I do the references that are in the movie. Right. And I think the movie's a ton of fun. It's way different than the novel, so different. There is no bombastic race, right? There is no The Shining scene. But then in the movie, all the stuff that they do, it's all the stuff that Steven Spielberg as a nerd loves. Steven Spielberg loves Godzilla, which is why we got a Jurassic Park movie where a T-Rex attacks a major city. That was his homage to Godzilla. He produced the Back to the Future movie, so we get the DeLorean. He does have a DeLorean in the book as well. But we get that fantastic race where we see the T-Rex and we see King Kong, things that influenced him. And we know that Steven Spielberg, because he picked up the directing of AI from Stanley Kubrick when Stanley Kubrick had passed away. He grew up a huge Stanley Kubrick fan. He's a Stanley Kubrick fanboy. So he put The Shining in his movie. So he that's what I love about it is that Steven Spielberg took his nerddom, the things he loved as a nerd,
and he was the only person to direct that movie.
It really I look at this and I know it's technically not like a fantastic Spielberg movie, and it's technically not one of the best of 2018, which is why it wasn't on my list. But for me, it's a movie and a book that were made for me. It was made for someone who's exactly like me, who is a huge fucking uber nerd who picks up on these little references and just runs with them and just geeks out over them. And Ernest Cline's Ready Player One. I fucking love it. And now Spielberg is pushing him to write a sequel novel just so he can make a sequel movie.
That's crazy.
Spielberg had so much fun doing it. Like he just, he had fun.
I believe it.
You know, and there are just, I promise you, if you haven't watched it since it came out, watch it again and see how many more references you can pick up each time. There are so many little things in there. I'm still trying to find Yoda. Apparently Yoda is in there somewhere. You just got to find him, but I'm still looking for him. So
I wonder if it's in one of those quick cut things.
It might be, but I love the novel so much, and I'm just really enjoying watching the movie. It's just, it's a popcorn flick, man. And that's exactly what Spielberg set out to do. Popcorn flick. Love it.
Right. Dude, good choice, man.
All right, so that's going to do it for our lists. If you have any book to movie adaptations from the year 2000 on that you would like to discuss, please reach out to us on Twitter at SuperMoviePod. If you want to check out any of Thomas Iannucci, the artist formerly known as the Italian, you can check him out on Spotify. You can just type in the name, Thomas Iannucci. Just type in INNUCCI Iannucci, and you can find all of the free music that he has streaming up there on Spotify for you to check out.
Yes, please.
And then we're also part of a network. We're part of the Podfix Network, so make sure that you check out us over there at podfixnetwork.com. If you are the type of person who likes to drink a little bit of wine while you read your book in the bath, and you drink a little bit too much of that wine, and you get stuck in that bath because you get the old rubber legs and you're going to have a hangover in the morning, make sure you head over to forhangovers.com and use the promo code SMBFish for your 15% off your order. Take that right in the bathtub. Wake up real fresh in the morning. Little pruny though. And of course, we always like to hear from listeners. So if you want to submit a listener question or a suggestion for anything on the show, you can reach out to us over on Facebook, Super Movie Bros Podcast. On there, you'll be reaching out to Jay. You can also email me. That is the baby boomer snail mail now. The email. You can reach out to us by Super Movie Bros Podcast.
It's becoming Facebook now.
At gmail.com. I want to thank all of you for listening tonight. Have a great night. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.